Thank you for joining us for Slate School's webinar about nurturing a student-centered environment. We're thrilled to have all of you with us here today. My name is Julie Mountcastle, and I'm head teacher and director of creative arts at Slate School, a 501c3 nonprofit nature-based elementary school in North Haven, Connecticut. I'll briefly introduce you to Slate School, review the webinar logistics, and we'll then hear from our 4 expert panelists. Slate School is an independent 501c3 nonprofit elementary school that cultivates creativity, fosters ingenuity, and inspires a deep passion for lifelong learning and discovery. Slate School offers a rigorous academic curriculum within a nurturing, joyful, and creative environment.
I'll sign up.
And priority, is that each child's innate and natural love for learning be nurtured and enabled to grow and flourish. Slate School is a new school, opening in fall 2018 in North Haven, Connecticut. Slate School has formed a community that is constantly striving to improve practice, to create meaningful educational experience for learners of all ages, and to change the landscape in education by honoring the child and demonstrating the clear and unique benefits of curiosity-driven education for all learners. Slate School convenes experts for important, real conversations about education, and these online dialogues, like today's, are free and open to the public. Now I'll describe the basic logistics of this webinar. We're so delighted to have all of you with us today. We have 4 amazing panelists, and they have a wealth of expertise to share with us during this next hour. Each of our panelists today will give a 2-minute introduction about themselves, their current role, and their key guidance and advice about nurturing a student-centered environment. We'll then dedicate the remaining time to a panel discussion and your questions and answers. We invite you to submit additional questions in the text box on the left of your webinar screen, and we'll select those questions to ask the panelists today as well. We'll proceed with having our panelists introduce themselves in alphabetical order. I'm delighted to introduce you to our first panelist, Jane Aronson. Jane, please begin by introducing yourself and tell us a bit about your background and current role, and then please share your key guidance about nurturing a student-centered environment. Jane.
Hi, everybody. Delighted to be part of this. I've known Jennifer for a long time, and Alexander, probably about 12 years. And so, cut to the chase, I'm the CEO of Worldwide Orphans Foundation, and I traversed education to medicine in my career. So I taught school probably somewhere between 12 and 15 years, all levels of education in both public and private, and then I went on to be a pediatrician, and so I was able to see the back end of education through the family's perspective in many environments, whether it was local and urban environments, rural environments. I was able to see what education looked like during the, I would say basically all through the 70s, and then went through medical school in the 80s. But my work abroad probably is very important to mention as I close my 2 minutes, and that is that I was heavily invested in programming for kids who were special needs in many countries around the world, 15 countries, where we either were providing access to education in the community through needs assessments, or we actually created environments in orphanages where kids could attain grade-level activities for school-age kids and preschool stimulation activities early on. And we had tutors in the orphanages, and then now we are heavily engaged in what's called Toy Library, which really is a preschool, if you will, that involves the use of play to provide children with an understanding of what education really means to them. And finally, we teach adults. It's reciprocal in that we are bringing adults in to work in the toy libraries and helping them understanding the importance of early childhood education and attachment, being trauma informed, which I think is extremely important for the 21st StudentCentered Education. And I love Slate, and I love Jennifer and Alexander for really sticking their necks out to make this happen, because it's not an easy thing to start such an innovative program in this day and age. So thanks for inviting me.
Well, Jade, thank you so much. I'd like to next introduce Ronda Bondi. Rhonda, can you begin by introducing yourself and your background and your current role, and then please share your key guidance about nurturing a student-centered environment? Rhonda?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Rhonda Bondi. And hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Hello, I'm Rhonda Bondi. I'm currently a lecturer on education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I taught for about 24 years in the public schools in New York City and in Arlington, Virginia. And I've retired, and now I prepare teachers for a variety of positions in urban schools. I spend a lot of my time every week, at least 2 or 3 days, in schools in New York City, helping teachers with decision-making to ensure that all learners are engaged, valued, and stretched every day. I just have a book that actually came out today.
Congrats.
Yeah, it's
perfect timing.
Big, exciting day. Differentiated Instruction Made Practical. And there I wrote the book with my research partner, who brought in all of the research roots for the many routines that I've developed over decades of teaching in public schools to effectively help students learn in an inclusive setting. So we're really excited about the book, and we have an online course that goes with it now here at Harvard. So I'm eager to see how teachers are able to use and apply these ideas. I think my biggest advice for everyone on student-centered learning, interestingly, comes from working with a pediatrician here in the medical school. That student responses are exactly that. They're a response to our stimuli. So I think a great place to start is to think about what we're emanating as the adults or facilitators or teachers in the room, how we emanate curiosity, trust, calmness, attentiveness, the things that really promote an environment where students can begin to take ownership of their learning, regardless of the kind of activity we might have them engaged in. So I think oftentimes we start with the activity, or we start by looking at the student, but I think my big advice would be to take a moment and to think about yourself first.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. And now I'd like to introduce Roberta Kolenkhov. I just ask you, Roberta, to tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and your current role, and then share your key guidance about nurturing a student-centered environment. Roberta?
Sure, my pleasure. My pleasure. So I'm going to start at the beginning. I went to PS 253 in Brooklyn, New York, and I think I always liked school. And used to make believe that I was a teacher and line up all my dolls. So play is very important because it often prefigures who we will become. I am now a professor at the University of Delaware and have been a researcher in developmental and educational psychology for many years. Our new book, Becoming Brilliant, What Science Tells Us About Raising Successful Children, is steeped in the science of learning, and it's all about the things that people can do to help children be successful. But we're changing the definition of success. We're borrowing from Ontario, Canada, and talking about creating good citizens, good people, and people who love learning and can engage in lifelong learning. We want our children to learn the skills that robots and computers can't do because we know the world is changing and they will be replaced. So we talk about the 6 C's. We also shared in a publication called Psychological Science in the Public Interest what principles of learning underlie the best kind of student-centric classroom, and that can be captured in a tweet. Children learn best when they're active, meaning minds on, engaged, not distracted, the material is meaningful to them, and they're socially interactive. And this all happens in the context of guided play, where caregivers gently scaffold children's learning and help them narrow down the dimensions they need to pay attention to. Free play, while great, is not as, oh, I turned on an alarm, is not as effective if caregivers, stop that, now I can't turn it off. It's not as effective for learning a specific goal that a caregiver or teacher might have in mind. Thanks for having me.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful perspective. Thank you, Roberta. And now I'd like to introduce Jana Zindell. And I'd just like to ask Jana to respond in the same way. Just tell us a bit about yourself, your background, your current role, and then just share with us your key guidance about nurturing a student-centered environment. Jana?
Thanks, Julie. Well, I'm thrilled to be on this panel. I was saying that before we started the call that 4 of us have actually been on a panel together before, and I'm honored to be here with Jane and Rhonda and Roberta. And just here, I'm going to echo what everyone's saying already, but just to give a little background on myself, I'm Jana Zindell, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Ubuntu Pathways. And our model provides vulnerable children with comprehensive support from cradle to career. So that's everything from pediatric HIV care to early childhood programs, first 1,000-day programming, all the way up through workforce development. And our ultimate goal is to ensure stable health and income for families in disadvantaged communities in South Africa. And one of the interventions that we have is early childhood, as I said, and it's built on that foundation of nurturing a student-centered environment where there's no access in the communities that we work. So my role, I'm responsible for creating the program strategy that allows us to help vulnerable children become stable, successful adults, and I lead the development of our initiatives and document and evaluate our challenges and successes. And I've been in the sector for over 15 years and lived in South Africa on the ground working in one community for 11 years. So, yeah, I mean, I can echo what everybody said, but basically, you know, if I had to give key, it's about having the right people in place. It's all about people to me, and you need teachers who can develop strong bonds with students. You can't expect students to feel like they're at the center of their development if they don't feel safe and secure. That's the foundation of it all. And the teachers that I admire are not overconfident in their own methodology. They're confident in their ability to connect and to read the needs of each child and to treat them as individuals. So with student-centered teachers, students become invested in the discovery of their own knowledge, and we're big into guided play as well. It creates that sense of agency for students, and they become empowered to ask questions and understand the world around them and then build on that knowledge base. Thanks.
Jana, great. Well, I just want to thank all of our panelists, and as I'm sure everyone heard, they all have a wealth of expertise and guidance to share with us today. We'll now proceed with the question and answer session. If you have additional questions, please post them in the text box on the left of your webinar screen. So I'd like to start with a question really for all of the panelists. And I think we've kind of edged toward it a little bit already, but maybe you could speak a little bit more specifically to this about how your own educational journeys have led you to value student-centered learning environments. You know, what has brought you to respect that guided play that I hear mentioned by all of you. So maybe Jane could start us off with that.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. That's very easy. I was probably a learning disabled child when I went to school in the 50s and 60s. And there was no name for it. I got tested, I think, when I was 9, and it was clear that I had some gifts. I don't recall much about what those gifts were, but that was sort of the buzz. And then nobody really did much except put me in the special class for 5th and 6th grade, which was like a class for kids who were, higher level students. And then I was excited about that experience and felt special, and then went on to be, probably I would say an A student or an A- student, and was a very driven child, very motivated, loved to learn. But I think the moment that I was put in the special class was really like the most exciting time in all of elementary school, because I felt special. I felt like suddenly maybe someone recognizes that aside from drawing a picture of my family without hands and feet, which was certainly a subject of discussion by the psychologist and my parents, I was then somehow considered to be worthy. Because prior to that, in kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade, I didn't really feel like there was, that I was different than anybody else. Even though I feel I was different. So there was my moment of having some focus from others who would then help me to achieve the goals that I had. And I was extremely aspirational as a child. I wanted to be a doctor by the time I was 3. And I really felt a destiny, that I had a destiny to do good in the world, but that I wasn't recognized. And you know what? The truth of the matter, I'll finish this little dissertation, is I probably still feel the same.
Wonderful. Okay, that's a great perspective. That's great perspective. Rhonda, I wonder if you could address that.
Yes, I trained as a ballet dancer as a young child and was in a children's ballet company and danced professionally. And I think the thing that has impacted, that today impacts my teaching, that experience in the arts. And I think the thing that was most important to me in becoming a teacher is I worked as an artist in residence with young audiences. And we used to go to the schools and we would have to ask the teachers, what would you really like your students to learn? And what kinds of experiences would you like your students to have? And what do your students need? What do they like? What are they interested in? And based on our interview with the teacher, we would create a drama curriculum fit just for that class based on what the teacher had shared with us. And I think that idea of starting with really observing and investigating the students and where we are and who they are, and designing learning based on that has probably been one of the most powerful experiences I've had.
And I'm sure that really empowered the kids too, to hear their ideas being the center of your plan. I think that's fantastic.
It's here to do today with the standards and everything.
Well, maybe we can talk about, maybe you could be thinking about some advice you have for teachers to kind of weave that kind of arts education that can be so freeing to kids into the curriculum. So maybe we can come back to that. Roberta, I wonder if you could tell us, how you've come to think that student-centered learning environments are really the way to go.
I identify strongly with the science of learning. That's what I do. My husband used to make fun of me because I always said, "Where's the data?" So I love the idea that children. Somebody took the words out of my mouth and said, "We want to give children agency in their own learning," and it isn't. For me, it isn't good enough to have those aspirations. I needed to get the data to see whether it was really true that drill and kill, which is what we largely engage in now, was somehow not as effective as giving children the opportunity to construct their own information alongside peers and adults. And we've done a number of studies now and reviewed thousands in that paper that appears in Psychological Science in the Public Interest that support the view that when children do have agency and when they are guided by a subtle but nurturing and determined adult, the child can acquire a deeper understanding of the material in question than when somebody is just talking at the child, which is what we have a lot of now. And we actually have data to support this. And the child also learns more when they work with an adult than when they're just given materials and free play. Because in free play, there are too many degrees of freedom. The child doesn't know what to focus on. So we found that, too, in a number of our studies, that free play just doesn't get you there if you have a curricular goal in mind for kids. So that's why we have adopted this notion of guided play and tried to pull it apart in our writings and in our research to understand what are the key factors in guided play that seem to make a difference for children's learning. And we're embarked on that with a frenzy right now.
So I think that's fantastic. And I'm just, with all this data, with all of this information that you've seen, that this is the way that children are most successful and really flourish. What do you think why do you think we're having such a hard time getting people to get on board with this? What's the stopper? Why isn't everybody doing this?
I think
what do you think, Roberta?
I think they have the wrong idea about how children learn best. There's more and more stuff out there about playful learning and the importance of playful learning. But some of it is actually not understood as well as it might be. I hope to be able to dig up a pamphlet that I have read recently that will help people. It almost seems like common sense, which I think people would say from the outside. You know, you got a bunch of little dumb kids in front of you. You just tell them. That's how you teach them. You just tell them, right? Well, it doesn't work that way for children. You can't just tell them and expect them to really understand and know what to do with that information. And that's what we've been doing. We've been just making kids sit passively and absorb our pearls. And that's not how learning takes place best. It prepares them for the world of tomorrow.
Great. So, Jana, I wonder if you could tell us what's brought you to this point of view. What's brought you to value student-centered learning environments?
Yeah. So my mom, I grew up with a kindergarten teacher. And so my house and my neighborhood and my city was a classroom to her. She saw opportunities to learn at every corner, intersection.
Yay!
Yeah, and she constantly asked us to reflect on what we were saying, hearing, feeling. And so I really think that worldview gave me a hunger to travel and to explore. And when I was a junior in high school, I insisted on going to Costa Rica for a cultural immersion trip. And most of my peers at the time, and even my teachers, were baffled by this. It wasn't incredibly popular at the time to go on a study abroad type thing, at least where I was from. But I had been brought up in this way where intellectual satisfaction was synonymous with exploration. So, you know, my weekends, my summer breaks, everything focused on getting those real life experiences. And so learning about nature and the environment through camping and hiking, exploring gave me that taste to hunger and see more. And my life is defined by being at the center of my own learning. I was never taught to rely just on books. I was guided to search out knowledge. And when I interact with young people, I don't often try to teach, but I hope to light that fire. And, you know, when we talk about our educational journey that led us to where we are now, mine continues. Till this day, my educational journey has been greatly impacted by having children. I have 2 little boys, and I've started to see things through their lens, and which has reinforced my beliefs on guided play and what's needed, and just this concept of drill and kill. And if we provide that road education and just drill children, that they don't get to explore and discover and unleash those burning questions that are inside of them.
Wow. I wonder, I guess it leads me to wonder, what do you think your mother did that made you have that hunger? I mean, could you boil it down to, you know, a few essentials for nurturing student-centered environments? I mean, what do you think are the must-haves? What can we, if we provide this, we're going to have a lot of success with kids. What do you think we need to do?
Yeah, well, my mom, it was all about everything was an adventure. Everything was a journey. And it was always about exploring. So we'd walk outside, and that was when the adventure started. Or we'd get in the car, and we'd go to the grocery store, and that's where the adventure continued. And so everything was about exploring with her guiding and helping us learn. And I think it's really about focusing on engagement and tailoring as opposed to creating a very specific structure. It's a human thing. Children know when you're paying attention to them, and children can feel when they're being given an opportunity to learn as opposed to being given a lesson in a box. And I think that's the difference. Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I wonder, Jane, if there are some countries that are doing this better than we are. Who are the leaders in student-centered learning environments, and what can we learn from them?
I'm not sure, tell you the truth, whether I know the answer to that question. I do know that there's a huge amount of privatization of education around the world, and there's money being made in the billions to provide high-tech education, and it's mostly being served up to Asian populations. Anyone can go online and look up the profit-making education companies that exist that are just they're just all, how can I say it? They're just amazingly powerful and gobbling up the world in the area of the new age education. And it's not really new age education the way you and I and everyone here is talking. It's really about technical skills and science and math, STEM, obviously, but without the nurturing. It's about, students being up till 1 or 2 in the morning preparing for exams in countries like China or Korea or Japan. And these are the individuals who supposedly will lead the world in technology. It's on our end, we're the ones that are seeking to look at education as more nurturing and loving and less focused on testing and more innovative and exploratory through another mechanism. So I'm just positing these ideas for you because it's something I pay attention to.
Right.
And it's concerning because what it goes to is the final thing I'm going to say is that people are not clear on which direction to go in about education right now. Like, who do we educate? How do we educate teachers? How do we pay them? Who should we pay? And how should we look at programs in colleges around teaching? There's a real mystery here as a person who took master's level education classes a very long time ago, thinking that I might go into teaching and administrative professions. But I think that what hasn't been answered is a lot of that. Who are our teachers and who will they be? And how can we get people to sort of wake up around what education should look like in the future? I think everyone's confused and insecure about what the right answers are.
Right. One of the things we don't do, I'm sorry, this is Roberta.
Oh, no, please, go ahead, yes.
Okay. One of the things we don't do in the United States is pay attention to the scientific research. In fact, one could argue that we are downright anti-intellectual in some ways. So here we have this whole science of learning, which has been going on for 25 and 30 years, and we know how children learn best. As I said before, there's thousands of papers. But remember when No Child Left Behind came in? That just flew in the face of what many scientists knew about how children learn best. Then we got it replaced with the Common Core, and the Common Core is much better, but the implementation is still all around testing, and that's a problem. I have nothing against testing. I have nothing against assessment, but it's how you do it, and it's the weight that you put on it. So we do have the online companies here, too. It drives me crazy when I see advertisements on television for a child sitting in front of a computer 8 hours a day. Give me a break. That does not help a child develop. That's all about making money for these companies. So I think we can look to Finland, as most countries do, because Finland is at the very top of the PISA scores, or the International Achievement Scores for 14-year-olds around the world. And what they do is they start their kids in school at 6 or 7 instead of 5. Like we're pushing down the kindergarten and first grade curriculum into preschool now on the assumption that faster is better. But faster is not better if we want to recognize what is developmentally appropriate for children. And it's not because Finland is homogeneous. Everybody always says, oh, but Finland is so homogeneous, we're so diverse. A country next door to them, Norway, does not have the same kind of educational system that Finland has, and their children do not do quite as well as Finland does. I've consulted there. So we really know what works, but we haven't implemented it, except in places like Sidwell Friends, where the Obama children went. And when I give talks around the world, I say, every child deserves a Sidwell Friends education, because that works and it empowers children to go on.
They just need $40,000 a year, right?
At least
Exactly.
40. Maybe it's up to 50 or 60 now.
Wow.
Yeah, that's, who knows?
My
Yeah.
goodness. So, Rhonda, I wonder, I'm thinking about, there may be some young educators listening today, and I'm thinking that, the young educators that I've met have a great understanding that differentiation and student-centered education is valuable. They know that those are valuable, but they're educated in that, and then they arrive in schools where the curriculum is packaged and test-driven. And I just wonder, what advice you'd give to them, and how do we keep the best of them as educators? Because I think that they must be discouraged sometimes. So what do you say to them?
Yes. Well, I give teachers a few tools to help them perceive what's happening in the classroom and respond to it. So I'm going to share those tools in case some people are listening, and then finish with what I think makes teachers want to stay in the classroom. So the first tool is, I think it's really helpful to keep in mind the ingredients of motivation. Oftentimes you feel like, wow, my students aren't motivated after lunch, or wow, this is we have to do this required unit. The students won't be interested. So I always like to just start with the ingredients of motivation and then find how I can increase. So the thing about differentiation, the big misconception, is the idea of decreasing or making things easier. It's actually always a matter of increasing. So one way to think about it is in terms of student motivation. I want to increase their autonomy or independence. I want to increase their feelings of belonging. I want to increase their feeling of competence. I want to increase their feeling of meaningful learning or interest and value and importance. So I call it A, B, C plus M: autonomy, belonging, competence, and meaning. And that's actually taken from decades of research on motivation. So I didn't make that up, but it's very easy for teachers to remember those four things, A, B, C plus M. And you just say, where in this next 40 minutes is an opportunity for students to exercise independence? Is there a way I could increase their ability to be independent by perhaps providing a help resource or a model or a peer to check in with to get feedback? These are the kinds of moves. So it's much easier actually than what we think. You don't have to make anything extra. I mean, that's not a great place to start. A great place to start is, given what you have, can you increase A, B, C, or M? Then the other thing is that a lot of times you say, give a direction and pick up your pencils to do a task, or it can even be to play a game, and many of the students don't get started. And this is always a problem. The teacher runs to help as fast as he or she can. And I always tell the teachers, how do you figure out what the problem is? Why are these students not engaged? And a great way to remember your tool, a toolkit for analyzing the problem, is CAR: clarity, access, rigor, and relevance. And so you just say, is this clear to students? Could I increase the clarity? Are they able to access it? Could I increase the access to this task? Rigor, is it challenging enough? Humans are interested in challenge. Is there a way I could increase the rigor? And relevance, is there a way to increase the relevance? So I call it a CAR check, and it's a really easy tool to begin your differentiation. You're much better off starting with that or starting with ABC plus M rather than starting with making 3 things or making loads of things and materials. Then the last thing is just the thing that I know that inspires me as a teacher is noticing learning. When I see a student learn, I am eager to come back to school the next day. That's why I'm there, and it feeds the core of my energies in the classroom. So I tell teachers to record student responses. It gives you a formative assessment, gives you a pulse of the classroom, so you're making decisions based on some evidence, and it also gives you a means to reflect on the learning that's actually happening that you might not be able to totally value and perceive in the moment as learning's unfolding during a lesson. So that's another easy tip, just to record student responses at least once in every lesson. And that, interestingly, that effort to record those responses can fuel your energy as a teacher for years.
Wow, that's great. I think I know intrinsically that what you're saying is so right, and I think you may have given some really great advice there. So thank you so much.
Sure.
I wanted to ask Roberta. I just wondered what advice would you give the teachers? Now we're on this advising teachers mode here. What advice might you give teachers on some ways that they could be creative and infuse play within their curriculum, despite the sort of standardized package curriculum? What are some ways that you would do that?
Right. Well, the first thing I want to acknowledge is that there are many fabulous teachers out there, and that many of them are feeling hamstrung because sometimes the teachers are not on the same page, and I mean literally. They can get into serious trouble if an administrator comes around and notes that they're not doing exactly what the curriculum is promoting. And that's a serious problem, because what it does is it makes teachers just passive deliverers of information, dispensers, and they can't take into consideration what children know and what they don't know in what they're working on. So I always like to think about, how did we enjoy learning as kids? As adults, you can throw a telephone book at me and tell me memorize page 4. I'll do it because I have all these metacognitive strategies that I can use. But kids aren't like that. So kids do best when we make learning engaging and fun. And I think if the teacher can think from that perspective, how can I make this fun? How can I relate this to kids' lives? Then I think they'll think up more game-like ways to approach learning. And that doesn't mean everything has to be ha-ha fun. We're talking about deep engagement, where students aren't even distracted by people around them because they're so into what they're working on. Another name for that is flow. And I think students can get that way if we recognize, A, that they want to learn. It's not that they come into our classrooms not wanting to learn. They want to learn, but they don't just want to be spoon-fed. And this is applicable to children from low-income and middle-income environments. It doesn't matter. Children want to have some agency in their own learning, and when teachers can figure out how to do that, and they don't have to operate in isolation. Teachers can create little groups for themselves that meet and trade curricular ideas. In a way, teachers are among the most isolated of the professions. That doesn't make any sense. People in a school should be sharing ideas.
Awesome. That's great. I want to ask this question to both Jane and Jana, but really anybody in the group. You all have such wonderful insights. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts about the best ways that we might help to change the landscape about play in education? How do we educate those people who, teachers or parents or anyone who might have lost their appreciation and their respect for play? How do we help them? So, Jana, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. I think it will always be a long journey to change preconceived notions, but the stakeholders I would try to work on first are parents. Parents have the most stake. And there's a strong desire to see children succeed, and therefore they'll always be swayed by watching results. But convincing parents to continue to build a learning environment at home, to me, is the best advocacy, because firsthand experience is really an effective tool.
That's a major guest officer.
One of the barriers to play-based education that I see is when parents construct a wall between what life is like at home, and school becomes a place where there's got to be this strict adherence to curriculum and structure. I think it's old-fashioned to look at things like that as the way things are than the way things should be. So I think it's about creating a culture in school communities where parents are involved and can see play in action and also engage in themselves. And when we look at a child as a human being that exists in the same way, whether it's school and before school and after school, we can see the usefulness of creating a consistent way of interacting with the world and learning.
Right.
So could I just make one observation? This
Sure.
is Roberta. So,
yes.
So just a quickie. I couldn't agree more with what I've heard, that parents are definitely super important to get on board and to get them to understand why a playful curriculum is so key. A rich curriculum with a playful pedagogy is my mantra. But when I speak, I tell parents, do you want your kid to be a boss or do you want your kid to be a worker? If you want your kid to be a boss, then you have to encourage playful learning, because that encourages them to develop their creativity, their ability to collaborate, their ability to communicate, the confidence that they need when they fail. These are what we call the 6 C's in our book, Becoming Brilliant. And parents want what's best for their kids. So when we can appeal to them that way, it makes a difference.
Great. Great. Jane, I wonder if you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I have a lot to add to the discussion of the environment.
Great.
Okay, coming from this world of, I guess, of the third world, if you will, and just wondering that, there are really hundreds of millions of children who are not educated still in the world, even though there's about 2.2 billion children. We're in the hundreds of millions of kids who don't even get classroom experiences or exposure to education in the home.
Yeah.
And much of what goes on in education in our world is in the home. And it may be parents, but it also may be caregivers and other family members, and certainly the media and TV and the computer, etc. But I think that, there's a very large world of technology that I really personally believe skews the learning away from learning. And I'm very obviously in love with my iPhone, but also believe that technology has removed, a lot of the nurturing that goes on in education. So, when Khan Academy came in, everyone was busy buying iPads at some point and giving a lot of grant money to bring iPads into the educational system, and forgetting about the fact that group learning is probably, and street learning is probably more important than anything else kids get when they're in gangs of kids roaming the streets as street children and without homes. There's a lot of learning that goes on in that population of children, believe it or not, that isn't all negative. It isn't all about trafficking and prostitution. There's a lot of camaraderie and closeness and connection that occurs from kids in groups. And that's been studied by many people in different models around the world where kids, are helped, in these situations that are so dire. But I really, I'm not here to give an answer. I'm just saying that the issue is huge. And I'm very concerned from my sector, my work, that, so many children aren't getting educated at all.
Yeah, that's a problem.
It's very, very, very troubling. Very troubling. I wonder, Jane, I think, play is kind of a level, and I think probably.
Could you repeat that?
Oh, sure. I was just saying that I think play levels the playing field for a lot of kids. And I was thinking for Jane in particular, how she might have seen play as something that maybe has helped children heal from difficult circumstances. And what are some things that you can learn from play that you probably can't learn from anything else?
Yeah, and in fact, I think that, I didn't want to, toot our horn, but I really feel very strongly that what we came up with the toy library and element of play was clearly our way of focusing education into the community. So it was a shared activity through the interactions of adults who are not formally educated and children who may not have the kind of strong environmental input or schools available to them in a formal setting. So, the play becomes a way in which we create a new way of really a family, if you will. I hate to use the word and say we're creating a new family. We're just creating a new way for kids to get stimulation. And that stimulation is shared stimulation. It's ways in which everybody works together to be expressive. It's very much about expression, because we do theater and dance and music and poetry and writing and skits and frankly, we're pushing the limit, including sport and teaching coaching. We're trying to really take the classroom and make it very artistic rather than so much didactic. And I'm not removing science and math for sure, because science and math is fun. I mean, there's a lot of new things going on where people are trying to make science incredibly fun and redesign homework in math. There's a lot of new ways to learn math where you actually play outside and you're doing the math outside, which I thought was incredibly clever. So, I mean, to tone down my enthusiasm, which certainly is needed, but my enthusiasm isn't the point. The point is that we feel that the toy library starts life off early to create a new way of learning, because everyone's invested and the adults are the ones that really be invested because they don't know how to play. So if you teach adults to play, you can really make a difference in ways that I don't think is self-evident all the time when there's discussion of education. So we're talking about people who aren't trained teachers, who we then mentor and turn into mentors, if you will, so that they become aware of how powerful their internal selves in learning.
Oh, somebody cut out.
I think so. Well, that's I think what's so great about I think what Jane's saying is that there's a collaborative element in play that can be used probably in every different curriculum that you might imagine. And so I'm just wondering. I love the idea of the arts, and I wanted to come back to Rhonda and see if you could talk a little bit more about bringing the arts into the classroom and how that collaborative tool of using the arts, whether it be dance or music or theater or all of the above, how those empower kids to be able to find their own voice and be their best.
Yes, I think the arts are a great place to start, and if possible, I always try to see if you can find an artist in residence to collaborate with. It's amazing how in every community there's arts organizations eager to reach out and collaborate with teachers. If you're a teacher, sign up for a class. Go to a museum when it's open, free at night. There's usually a free evening or Saturday at every arts institution sometime during the year in your community. And I think if you participate yourself, it's a great starting place. I think another really great starting place is just to practice looking and observing and thinking. And there's a free website called Making Thinking Visible, with visible thinking routines that were developed here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And these routines were a result of initial research looking at how people learn with and through the arts. But the thinking routines, they don't require any paint or any management, really. They're very simple 3 action verbs, and it opens up a space for students to recognize their own thinking and to be creative in a short 3 minutes in a lesson. So it's a no materials, no handouts, but an opportunity.
Oh, that's great. Great. Thank you. I just want to come back to you, Jana, and just I'm wondering, because I know the scope of students that you serve is quite large, and I'm wondering how do you think student-centered education during the school years impacts students during their adult years? What do you see there?
Yeah, sure. Well, I just want to briefly comment on what Jane was saying a bit earlier about the digital divide. There was a really good article in the New York Times yesterday about America's real digital divide, just in terms of what happens in the home and how parents support, or just what children do at home, and how it's so easy to just put a kid in front of a television or an app, whatever, and how that's actually creating a lot more challenges than we possibly imagined before. So I just wanted to share that. And as far as that question, I really think that if you grow up driving your own learning and feeling as though your opinion is important, just back to that concept of having agency, then you have an easier time feeling that way as an adult. And as educators or anybody in this space, what we want to do is help build resilient grown-ups, right, that are socially and emotionally healthy and that can communicate effectively and collaborate and work well with others and explore and create and try to make the world a better place. I think that's pretty much what we're going for. And student-centered education allows children to have that agency, and they learn that they have a voice, and they're provided with strong social and emotional connections, if it's done right, that support their confidence and allow them to explore and take risks. So the student-centered environment allows for children to play freely and explore, but also, as we were talking about, there's free play, but there's guided play, and it also allows time for intentional conversation and experiential learning, and those things together enhance the child's ability to have a foundation for social and emotional cues that are essential later in life. And I think the application of student-centered learning in conjunction with real life experience, fosters that environment that helps build those character traits that we want to see in adults.
That's great. That's wonderful. Well, I want to thank all of our amazing panelists for this robust conversation. This concludes our webinar. Thank you again to our panelists and to all of you for joining us.